The sun blazed fiercely over the bustling streets of Adetoun as Adetoun hurried past market vendors shouting their wares. She was late for a family meeting at her fiancé's house, a crucial gathering since the wedding date was fast approaching. As she reached the compound, Adetoun adjusted her head wrap and wiped the sweat from her brow. Entering the living room, she was greeted by a chorus of murmured greetings and a subtle tension hanging thick in the air. Her fiancé, Jimmy, stood up and smiled. "Adetoun, you're here. We were just waiting for you." Adetoun settled into a seat next to Jimmy, casting a polite smile at his mother, Mrs. Salako, who sat across with her arms folded tightly over her chest. The elders exchanged pleasantries while Jimmy's mother watched Adetoun with an expression that could freeze palm oil in the sun. "It's been a while, Mama," Adetoun offered gently. "Yes, it has," Mrs. Salako replied, her lips barely curling into a smile. "And I hear you are doing well with your small business." Her tone was dismissive. Adetoun felt a stir of discomfort, but nodded. "Yes, thank God." Mrs. Salako glanced briefly at her husband before speaking again. "I hope you know Jimmy comes from a responsible family. We have traditions to uphold, and not everyone is fit to join our lineage, especially those who chase money." Jimmy shifted uneasily. "Mama, Adetoun is an accomplished woman. I love her." Adetoun stiffened at the implied accusation. She watched as Mrs. Salako's eyes narrowed, studying her like a hawk sizing up prey. After the meeting, Jimmy walked Adetoun to the gate, anxiety etched on his face. "I'm sorry about what Mama said in there." Adetoun forced a smile, though her insides twisted with a mix of indignation and hurt. "It's okay, I understand how mothers are." "No," Jimmy insisted. "She doesn't know you like I do. You're not what she thinks." "What does she think?" Adetoun asked, her voice firmer now. Jimmy paused, struggling with his words. "She thinks you're with me for the wrong reasons." Later that night, Adetoun sat on the balcony of her own home, the soothing sounds of Lagos traffic drifting up from the street below. She reflected on the day's events, feeling the sting of Mrs. Salako's words like a fresh wound. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Jimmy. "Don't worry about today. I love you. Good night." Adetoun sighed deeply. As if love alone could mend what was folding silently, like iron against iron. The following week brought more whispers. Adetoun heard talk around the market, snippets of conversation that seemed to always trace back to her. At work, her assistant, Bola, approached with a cautious look. "Madam, there's something you should know," Bola said, hesitating. "People are saying things about you, about how you're after money." Adetoun looked at Bola, her heart sinking. "Who is saying such things?" The words spread like wildfire through dry grass. Adetoun noticed the change in expressions, the tightening of smiles that once were genuine. Suddenly, she was a stranger in her own community. One afternoon, while she was busy rearranging her shop, 3 women walked in. Their conversation was laden with passive-aggressive compliments. "I heard your fiancé is a banker," one woman said with a sly grin. "And they say he takes care of you very well," another added, her words dripping with insinuation. Adetoun's patience snapped. "You're welcome to ask me directly if you have questions. I have nothing to hide." The women exchanged looks before one finally said, "And what do you contribute, Adetoun? Or is marriage just your next big investment?" Her chest heaved as she responded, "I've worked for everything I have, and I've supported my family for years." Adetoun returned home that night more exhausted than usual. Her mind was a tangled web of thoughts and fears. She called her older brother, Kaode, to confide in him. "Kaode, it's like a nightmare I can't wake up from," she began. "People talk," he said gently, "especially when you're doing well. But you must hold your head high and trust yourself." "But Jimmy's family?" Adetoun's voice trailed off, the underlying fear of losing him ever present. The following weekend, Jimmy invited her for lunch at their usual spot. They sat by the window as rain pattered gently against the glass. Jimmy seemed distracted and finally broached the subject. "Mama wants us to create an agreement before we marry," he said quietly. "What kind of agreement?" Adetoun asked, suspicion edging into her voice. "It's about protecting family assets," he explained, unable to meet her eyes. Adetoun felt her world tilt. So that's what this is about, she said slowly. They think I want something from them. Adetoun, it's not like that, Jimmy insisted, reaching for her hand across the table. She pulled it back, a firm resolve building within her. Maybe it's time they realize that not everything is about what I can take. Maybe they should see what I actually bring. Jimmy's brow furrowed. What do you mean? Adetoun leaned back, contemplating how much of herself she'd hidden for the sake of simplicity. The truth was, her small business that Jimmy's mother mocked was only the tip of the iceberg. What they didn't know was the empire beneath the surface, the investments and properties she quietly maintained. Perhaps it's time to show them who really stands to lose, she said cryptically. Her sisters, Taiwo and Kahind, were delighted to assist. They arranged for a family dinner at a prestigious restaurant owned by mutual friends. It buzzed with elegance, its reputation unimpeachable in the community. Adetoun had not planned for spectacle, but for revelation. Jimmy seemed unaware, but his family's expressions were intensely curious. As everyone settled, Mrs. Sulaco looked around. Such a place, she commented, her voice light but loaded with meaning. Adetoun stood up, holding a champagne glass for a toast. To family and to knowing our worth. As the evening wore on, several respected guests approached Adetoun warmly, including the restaurant owner, who addressed her as someone significant. Finally, when Jimmy's father asked about the compounding respect paid to her, Adetoun simply said, "You'll find that out soon." As they stood to leave, Mrs. Sulaco, perplexed by the treatment towards Adetoun, cornered her near the entrance. "If there's something we need to know, you should tell us." Adetoun, looking her future mother-in-law directly in the eye, replied, "It's true what they say, Mrs. Sulaco. I'm not chasing money. I guard my own very carefully." With those words hanging in the air, she walked out, leaving Mrs. Sulaco in stunned silence, the realization dawning that the true gold lay not in the Sulaco family coffers, but within the very woman she had doubted. Now, the tables were set for a different discussion, one where power was not a presumption, but a fact. The next morning, as Adetoun prepared breakfast, her phone buzzed with a message from her brother, Kaode. "We need to talk. It's important." Curious and slightly apprehensive, she texted back, agreeing to meet him later. The conversation with Mrs. Sulaco had left a lingering sense of unease, and she sought comfort in the familiar rhythms of making akara as dawn broke further. At the small cafe near her shop, Kaode sat stirring his coffee, looking deep in thought. When Adetoun arrived, he straightened, offering her a weak smile. "You looked like you've seen a ghost, Kaode," Adetoun teased lightly, though her heart carried a shadow of concern. Kaode sighed. "It's about Jimmy's family. Word keeps spreading about you being a gold digger. Mama is upset." Adetoun's face hardened. "It's like they don't even know me. Or care to." Adetoun shook her head. "What revenge? I only stated a fact. Let them imagine the rest." Kaode leaned forward. "Is this who you want to be? What does this path lead to?" Her brother's words lingered, a quiet echo beneath her indignation. But there was truth in his caution, and she knew it. That evening, Jimmy visited her home unannounced. He looked worn out, the conflict pulling visible lines across his usually jovial face. "Adetoun, I'm sorry," he began, letting out a breath. "Mama said some things she shouldn't have." "It's not just about her," Adetoun replied, voice edged with vulnerability. "This constant doubt, it chips away, Jimmy." "Let's leave her opinions aside," Jimmy pleaded. "You and I, we should matter more than anyone's words." As she listened to Jimmy, Adetoun's resolve wavered. Beneath the shield she had built lay exhaustion, a soul yearning for peace. "Jimmy, I want to marry you. But I won't beg for respect," she said. "I won't continue if your family cannot see me for who I truly am." Jimmy nodded slowly. "Then I will make her see, Adetoun. She must see." The next day, after another tense family meeting, Mrs. Sulaco confronted Jimmy. "Why do you defend her? Don't you care for your future?" Jimmy sighed, steeling himself for an uncomfortable truth. "Mama, you need to understand, Adetoun is not after our money." "How can you be so sure?" his mother demanded, skepticism clouding her gaze. Because I've seen her work, how she stands strong on her own. She carries more integrity than you credit her for. Mrs. Sulaco regarded her son with incredulity, stunned by his defense of Adetoun. You would choose her over family? Jimmy met her eyes squarely. Mama, if you understood the strength she holds, you'd welcome her with open arms. The words reverberated in the silent room, rippling unease across the tensions drawn between love and pride. That night, Adetoun found herself wandering the quiet streets, soul heavy with what had been left unsaid. She found herself outside the church she had once attended with her grandmother. She entered, the familiar scent of old wood and burning candles a balm against her wounds. As she settled into a pew, a hesitant prayer formed on her lips. God, I thought proving them wrong would bring peace. But it rings hollow, she whispered into the silence. In the stillness, Pastor Cola, who was preparing for morning service, noticed her. He approached quietly, sitting beside Adetoun with gentle curiosity. Child, what troubles you at this hour? Adetoun shook her head, feeling tears press against her resolve. I wanted them to see my worth, but now everything feels broken. Pastor Cola nodded. Sometimes we seek justice as if it can heal us. But it only leads to more wounds if Christ's peace doesn't lead the way. Adetoun exhaled shakily. I wanted to hurt them with the truth. Truth holds power. But revenge poisons a soul, the pastor said softly. Seek restitution, not revenge. Trust God to mend what is beyond words. Reflecting on his words, Adetoun felt her heart shift, subtle yet profound. Thank you, Pastor Cola. Later that week, during a gathering at Jimmy's family home, Adetoun stood up, ready to address an audience she found increasingly familiar yet distant. Mama, Papa, she began, her voice steady. I may have more wealth than you assumed, but at the heart of it, I seek family, not fortune. Mrs. Sulaco, still grappling with the morning's revelations of Adetoun's accomplishments, watched in silence. The room was silent, the tension thick as layers of ice. Adetoun continued, I chose Jimmy, and through him, I choose you all. I ask no more than to be seen for who I am. Jimmy looked at his mother, a plea woven into the hope of his gaze. Mrs. Sulaco's expression softened, realization clawing through her previous ignorance. How had she misjudged the woman standing bravely before her? Breaking the silence stretching unbearably long, Mrs. Sulaco slowly stood. Adetoun, she began, voice imperfect but genuine. I see now that you are more than we thought. She turned to her son, her resolve weakening in the light of truth.
I'm sorry.
I judged hastily. In that moment, Grace entered the room, diffusing tension like morning light cresting a distant horizon. Jimmy reached for Adetoun's hand, interlocking their fingers with a quiet reverence. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was a start, a step towards healing defined by Christ's love and understanding. Adetoun smiled, not because everything was resolved, but because the willingness to change was enough, for now. As Adetoun and Jimmy walked out of the house, hand in hand, she murmured to him, I thought revenge would give me peace, but it couldn't. Only he fulfills. Jimmy squeezed her hand, a silent agreement binding them to what matters most. They paused to stand beneath the towering sky, feeling the calm of a new beginning seep into their bones, resolved to navigate towards hope rather than hurt.
Thank you so much for listening to this intriguing story. I hope it touched you or taught you something. For more stories like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the page. And guys, if you'd like to see a part 2, or you have thoughts on what happened, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next story.